Welcome to the Genealogy Happy Hour, a place where new family historians can learn to document their family histories and celebrate their new discoveries. I'm Amy.
And I'm Penny, and we're here to help you discover your family tree from the beginning. Welcome to episode 34. In this episode, Amy and I are going to briefly discuss military records, where you can find them, what you're going to find in them, some things like that.
Lots of good genealogical information can be gleaned from military records.
Yes, they can.
Even on women in your family.
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes, that's true. But first, before we get started...
What wine do we have today, Penny?
So it's the end of summer and getting ready for fall, although it doesn't feel like that at all here in Florida. We're going to finish up the year with a rosé, and this one is La Cabane au Huiseau Bordeaux Rosé. And I'm sure I pronounced that very poorly. But it's a 2015 bottle, and it's really pretty. It has a kind of a real summery label. The house is on the stilts and the seagulls over the water. It's just really refreshing. It's a very light rosé, delicate. It has a deep pink color with notes of red berry and a spice-infused finish. And it's very good.
Yeah, it is very good. Always love rosé in the summertime. Very refreshing.
It's great to drink while podcasting
Very
as well.
French, so I like it. All right, but now we're going to talk about military records.
Yeah.
So what, we're talking about Americans.
Yes.
For the most part,
yes.
In these wars.
Yes.
So what wars are we talking about?
Well, okay, so you probably want to know, did you have an ancestor who fought in a war, and what are your options to look for? So just to break it down quickly, you've got from 1755 to 1763 are the French and Indian Wars. 76 to 83, Revolutionary War, which most of us like to look for. 1780 to 1890s are Indian Wars. 1812 to 1815 is the War of 1812. 1815 are the Barbary Wars, which a lot of people don't think of to look there. 1846 to 48, the Mexican War. 1861 to 65, Civil War. Most of us do look there. Can find somebody in our family that fought on one side or the other. 1898, the Spanish-American. 1917 to 19, World War I. 1941 to 45, World War II. And then more recently are the 1950 to 53, Korean. 65 to 73, Vietnam. 1991, the Gulf Wars. Starting in 2002, Afghanistan, and 2003, Iraq. But we're concentrating mostly on the very earlier ones.
Up until probably World War II. Although, if you have an immediate family member who died in one of the later wars, you can, I believe if you have the death certificate, you can obtain information on their service record through the Freedom of Information Act. And there's actually forms online that you can fill out and then send in.
And most of the earlier wars I mentioned, the age range for enlistment was 16 to 60. But of course, we all know that our ancestors lied a lot. You know,
Absolutely.
Younger men wanted to get in on it, so they said they were older.
Keep that in mind. There's also another war that many Americans fought in, and actually I had a third great grandfather who fought in it, and that was the war for independence in Texas.
Oh, of course.
And he was from Pennsylvania. He joined up a group, and they all, he was a teenager, rode down to Texas, fought for Texas independence in 1836, 37, and was awarded by the Republic of Texas some bounty land for his service.
Awesome. Yeah, I forgot about that one.
You need to check if your ancestor did that or you think that they might have been involved in that, then check with the Texas State Archives. They have all of those records online.
That's
perfect.
And
digitized too.
Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah, things that you need to know before you're looking is what state did your ancestor live in. That's helpful, although they might have signed up with, if they're close to a border, a regiment in the state next door. Don't just stick with that state, but use your map and look where they're located.
And check ages too,
Yes.
because there are many stories that our ancestors or families have told about so and so, great grandfather who fought in this war. But check that time period to make sure he was even eligible, or
Right.
in that age range.
Could be
to
somebody
able to
with the
fight.
same name. It might be. I know when my family, or my husband's family, there's 2 Daniel Bonowitzes that both fought in the Civil War, and just trying to keep those 2 straight. Knowing which one was in what regiment helps keep them straight.
Sure. If you are wanting to look at military records because you want to join something like the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution, the first thing, of course, they have lists of the patriots already proven on their website that you can go in and check. But also check the list of loyalists in that particular area, because there's been a couple of times when I've been helping someone with their papers for DAR, and I've looked on the loyalist list, and there's their ancestor right then and there. It doesn't necessarily just qualify you, but what you're going to have to do is find service for that particular ancestor that was in favor of the Patriots.
Yes.
And rather than, as long as the last documented evidence you have shows that they were supporting the Patriots, then you should be okay.
Wow.
So, but check that too. All right, so what documents are we looking for when we are researching military records? Well, what we're going to be talking about today, I think mostly are the original documents, the primary information. There are a lot of published compilations out there, biographical compilations from the Revolution and from the Civil War. There's any genealogical library will have volumes on those.
Right.
And those are great places to start. Virgil White, everyone's familiar with his numerous publications on pension indices and some genealogical abstracted information from the records, which was a wonderful resource until the age of computers, and now we're able to go online and get a lot of that information. But his publications are always good to use if you're in the library. Check those out as well. But we're talking about compiled service records. We're talking about selective service, draft card information, bounty land warranties, and pension applications, and then the Southern Claims Commission records.
Okay. So let's dive in there and start off with the compiled service records.
All right. So compiled service records are just the records that are based on military service in the U.S. Army for regular forces raised by the U.S. government before 1912 for enlisted men and 1916 for officers. And then the volunteer service during Revolution to the Philippines insurrection from 1775 to 1902. And this is really records that are in the possession of the National Archives in Washington, D.C. for the most part. You can get copies from NARA online, or you can place an order for them for these early records, anywhere from $30 to about $80 for them to research that and then pull those records for you. But then you also need to check out Fold 3 and Ancestry, both.
Yes. Fold 3 is such a great resource too.
It is, and in fact, I think I've told this story before. The first time that I went to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., I wanted to see a pension record for a Revolutionary War patriot. And the first thing they did was they sent me over to the computer and set me down and put me on Fold 3.
And you're like, I could have done this at home.
Exactly. Because you're not going to be able to actually touch those pension records from the Revolution. They've all been digitized and they've all been uploaded.
Yeah.
So you can just get all of those records from Fold 3.
Yeah.
If you don't have a subscription, you can go to the library.
Yes, of course.
And they have them for free there. So you can just download them to a thumb drive and then take them home.
And do your online research thoroughly first before you make a trip somewhere and put out that expenditure.
Right. Because if that was the only reason I had gone there, I would have been really disappointed. For sure. But the information, so what information are you going to find in these records? Penny?
Oh, well, The information, you're going to find the rank, you're going to find their unit, the date they mustered in and out, and it could be repetitive if they had multiple tours, any hospitalization they had, if they were captured, if they died, any pay vouchers, and possibly their physical description.
Right.
So you might know what they looked like. But I always like those tall, medium, blonde, brown, be a little more specific.
True. And it's not going to be a lot of information. It's basically just a little card.
Yeah.
It's just a little card. And if you want to delve deeper into the service of that particular, or how that particular regiment functioned, then you need to go into that military history of that particular regiment. And then see if your ancestors' name happened to be mentioned there. So
right.
You're probably not going to get birth date information. You're only going to get where they mustered in. So probably someplace close to home. As you mentioned,
but again,
you mentioned earlier, if they were living near a border, they could have gone across the border to another state and enlisted in that other state. So
yeah.
And again, we're talking about, for the most part, the U.S. Army. Although they do have Confederate records as well. But we'll talk about Confederate records when we get down to pensions, because they will not have the pensions there. So you're going to be able to get some information from that.
So the next one is service records from 1912 to 1960.
So these will be the two World Wars and Korean War. And unfortunately, there was a fire in 1973, and that destroyed about 80% of the U.S. Army records. So if your ancestor fought in World War I, World War II, was in the Army particularly, and keep in mind that there was no Air Force at the time. So, for instance, my late husband's ancestor, grandfather actually, was in the U.S. Army, but in the Air Division, and his records were destroyed. So, you will be able to get the...
So frustrating.
It is. Yeah. You will be able to get the DD-214, which would be their... the form that they get at their discharge, and that kind of gives kind of basic information: birth date, where they were born, any medals that they were awarded, their rank, discharge information if they were honorable, general, or whatever. So, but you're not going to get much more than that. There's probably not going to be any relative information on that. Just confirming that they did serve.
Yeah.
And that's about it. I think you might have a little bit more luck if your ancestor was in the Navy, but again, the Freedom of Information Act, you can always use that as long as the ancestor is deceased. Or if it's someone who's living, your husband, your father, your grandfather, they can apply for themselves and get their information.
Yes.
So that would be good. Draft records.
Those are the best. And you can get those on, a lot of them on Ancestry, and they'll pop up, and they will have, they're little cards like you had mentioned before, and have sometimes the physical description as well on there.
They do the
address.
The World War One. They have the cool, and it says if they have any scars, sometimes they'll have the scars or something like that, or missing an eye.
Where did that come from? Right.
The nice thing about those is it does have the birth date, complete birth date, and their name, and then the nearest relative or something like that. So
another clue.
Right.
And it might be a name you recognize, and it might be a name you don't recognize. And then if you don't recognize it, you figure out who that person is.
Right. It also gives you an idea of if they had been married, if they were married at the time, or if they, if you're trying to figure out when did my ancestor get married. That'll give you a clue. Should I be looking before or after that date?
You might find even like a first wife compared to somebody you thought they were married to.
Yep, that's very true. It'll give occupation, employer, I believe, citizenship status. Although I think that I might, that's important to take a look at, but they could be a little dishonest on that. They may say naturalized citizen, and they may not have completed the naturalization process.
Right.
So don't be frustrated if you start looking for naturalization records and you may not find anything. They may have fudged that a little bit. I don't know. Especially during World War I. For instance, my grandfather, he was born in Germany, and his citizenship was actually taken away from him during that time period because of the anti-German sentiment. So he wasn't even allowed to fill one out. But
that's a shame.
So, but those are really good. One of the other thing that I have used that those World War I draft records for was trying to determine two men with the same name in New York City, who lived in New York City, who were born both in like 1892, 1893, and trying to figure out which one they were in the census records. So because the World War I draft cards have the address where they're living, I was able to use that address and track them down in the census. For instance, the 1920 census, they were still living in the same location, and then I could fill in the rest of the family from that information.
So you know which one was which.
Right.
That's
so
awesome.
Not only does it have the genealogical information, but also start tracking those addresses and might lead you to other family members. So that worked well for me in that instance.
That makes me think of, totally off topic for just a second, I was just in Washington, and we went to the International Spy Museum, which was really fun. I thought it was fun. I failed miserably at the spy test because you have to, you sign in, just for fun, you can sign in and take a personality, and you have to memorize all the stuff about them, and then you have to present yourself and remember all that stuff, of which I missed several key points. But then they give you a mission. You go through this whole museum, and at the end, when you check out, you have to sign out and give your mission if you accomplished it. No.
You didn't accomplish your mission?
Couldn't even remember what the mission was. It was so bad. Anyway, this just makes me think of, not spy stuff, but, just doing that private investigation.
Absolutely.
You are an investigator and using every one of these little clues to determine who it is you're following and find out about them.
That's a good point. Yeah. You're not just looking at birth date and relationships, but you're also gleaning every piece of information out of that document to try and help you track down the next clue.
Yes.
The next piece of evidence.
Right. It's like a scavenger hunt to the end to get the answer to the question that you are searching. All right, let's move on to Bounty Land. This is something
warrants.
I've not used ever. So
Bounty Land warrants are applications filed based on military service. Usually they were awarded by the federal government for the Revolution, for Revolutionary War service, for the War of 1812 service, for service in the Mexican War, as well as the numerous Indian wars. They can be found through National Archives from 1775 to 1856. You had to have service through 1855 in order to qualify for the last of the bounty land through the federal government. A great way to look at digitized records is going to the Bureau of Land Management, General Land Office, and they actually have a database there. And you check which state your ancestor served in, or which, wherever the land was at, and you can actually pull up the bounty warrant that was awarded to your ancestor. So I definitely check there. But keep in mind that just because your ancestor was given some land does not mean that they actually lived on that land. For instance, my ancestor who fought for the Republic of Texas, he was given, whatever it was, a square mile of land in Texas, and he hired an attorney and sold the land in Austin, and he never lived on it at all.
Never lived there.
He just took the money, went back up to Indiana, bought a farm and settled and lived up there his entire life. And a lot of times people will use these, for instance, here in Florida, when the territory of Florida opened up in 1820, many people were getting land here, and their genealogists or family researchers want to use that as proof that their ancestor was actually in this territory at that time. And it's not proof that your ancestor was in the territory, it just proves that they were given land there. A lot of time they just flipped it and sold it, took the money, and stayed where they were. Yeah. So you need to follow up by looking in the census records to see if your ancestor is actually in that location in the next census after they were awarded that land. So But you're going to find very basic information. You're going to find their name, their age, the place of residence when they applied, the number of acres that they were awarded, and the location of the land that they were awarded. So, again, you can start tracking tax records in that location to see if they paid the taxes on it. There are different ways that you can be, if they sold it, you can be looking in that county's land register to see when they sold it.
Yeah. Yeah, another good resource.
State archives too. Some of the states, no, that was just, we were talking about national, the federal government land, but some of the states also awarded land for service to the state. New York, Pennsylvania, Virginia, for the Revolutionary War service.
Okay.
So you need to check the state archives. I know, for example, the state of Virginia, those bounty land warrants are online through the Library of Virginia. So even though it was a federal military service, it was actually, they were volunteering for the colony of Virginia for this, so that's why you need to look in both.
Nice. All right, pension applications, they're our favorites.
They are our favorites.
You can get so much information off of a pension application.
Lots of information. Lots of information about how our ancestors were living. So, where would we find those records?
Well, we are going to find those records at the National Archives again, where you can order them for a fee. Make sure you have the right person, because when you're paying for that, you don't want to get the wrong file, somebody else by the same name. You can find them on Fold 3. And at the state archives, we'll have some Confederate records, which are digitized, or you can order them. And the information that you can find in those are, of course, the names, the relatives' names, date and location of birth, marriage, death of the veteran, income, physical ailments, personal recollection of service records, and physical description. You'll a lot of times get letters from neighbors or friends and family attesting to the person's service, and those letters will go into a lot of detail about things that were happening at that time, which can give you a great insight to your ancestors' lives at that moment.
You need to look for not only if, for instance, there's a family I was researching, and on Fold 3, he shows up as, I knew he was in the Confederacy in Florida. I have his compiled military service record, and so I was looking for a pension for him. And it was very interesting that I found it very interesting. I could not find a pension for him for his Confederate service, because he helped his sister-in-law, who was widowed, apply for his younger brother for the widow's pension.
Sure.
For her. And he wrote a letter, and he was you could just see that he was the one who was getting all the information together for her and helping her try and get her widow's pension for his younger brother's service. So why wouldn't he have applied for himself?
Yeah.
And then when I was digging on Fold 3, his name came up with an alias. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird. That can't be him, So I started doing a little bit more digging, and this was my trip. This was the same trip to the National Archives in Washington, D.C., where you can actually physically get your hands on the Civil War Union pension records. And so I ordered this pension record under this alias, and it was actually him. Oh. And there was probably at least 175 documents, maybe 100 documents in this.
Probably felt like you hit the mother lode.
He explained that towards the end of the war, the Southerners knew that they were losing. The Confederates knew they were losing. And in order to get money, he signed up to substitute for a Union soldier. So he got compensated for being filling in for a Union soldier. He was shipped up to Connecticut. He stayed 3 months in Connecticut, and then he was sent back down to the South because he was very familiar with boats and boating, and so he was a part of trying to keep once the Union had taken over a bay or a port, trying to keep that open. And so he explains all of this. He explains the reason that he used an alias was because he was afraid of retribution from his neighbors. He had his relatives testify or give affidavits that they knew him by both names, and the reason that they knew that he was using the alias was because of this. And he talked about all the reasons why he needed this pension, and he fought them for a long time because they didn't want to give it to him, and he eventually did win a pension from the U.S. government for his Union service, which was probably there was a cutoff. They had to have been in service before 1865. And he joined like December of 64, and so they were trying to cut him out of it because of the time that he joined.
Sure.
So that was his problem. So definitely check both, because I believe it's not unusual, from what I have learned since then, that these guys would actually, many of them did switch sides towards the end, because they
saw the light.
Saw the light. Yeah, they saw that they were on the losing end, and to get some hard currency.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Okay, well, right into that, we've got the Southern Claims Commission, which is also a Civil War.
It is, and that's really something that everybody should take a look at if their ancestor was living in the South during the Civil War, and survived into the 1870s.
Okay, and that's also found at the National Archives or Fold 3 and sometimes on Ancestry.
Correct. Yeah, they have them digitized. I know Fold 3 has a complete file digitized. I found my third great grandmother had made an application, and in 1872, I think she started it. And then I know that at least a portion of that is also on Ancestry. But, this is a 39-page document that my second great-grandmother applied for. There were 90 questions that they were asked. And so there's an answer to each one of those. They give the 90 questions in the document, and then there's the answers on a separate page so you can compare. But, like my third great-grandmother and then her daughters were both her witnesses. So that would be, one of them would be my second great-grandmother.
Okay. Another great way to prove a name and a relationship.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But within this file, because her husband died, I think in 1866 or 1867, she had to prove that the property was hers. So a copy of his will is included in this application.
Excellent. Had you been able to find that anywhere else at the will?
I had not looked for it, but there it was.
Yeah.
So I can go back down to the county, Shenandoah County, and see if there's any more information on that. Mm-hmm. But it's a great little snapshot of life during the Civil War in the South, as well as in the 1870s when it was very depressed. You had Reconstruction going on.
Right.
Now, keep in mind, too, that in my grandmother's case, my third great-grandmother's case, she's trying to get money. And in order to get money, she has to look like she was supporting the Union the whole time.
Okay. So how'd she do that?
Very positive. There's a very positive twist on it. And she says that that she's lived in Shenandoah her whole life, and that she did nothing during the war except feed the Union soldiers when they came to our home. But it says she was where she was born. It says her birth date, birth year. She says that these are the items that were taken, or that were taken by the Union soldiers. And, it's 10 tons of hay, 95 bushels of corn. Now, these are kind of interesting. 66 gallons of vinegar. 66 gallons of vinegar.
Why would you even have 66 gallons of vinegar?
There's
I'm so curious about that.
30 gallons of apple butter.
Okay.
10 bushels of Irish potatoes and 95 bushels of sweet potatoes.
Wow.
So, and then there's clothing. There were 2 good overcoats. And during the questioning, she goes into quite detail on each of these items. There's 9 total items listed, and it was always the finest hay. It's the best clothing. This clothing was never worn before. It's the best Irish linen. Please
pay me back for this.
Exactly. Exactly. So everything was the finest and the best, and it's always, but she's very general. It was always General Sherman's army.
Okay.
But I don't know what the regiment was. She didn't go into a lot of detail after that, which didn't help her case.
Sure.
She didn't bring anybody forward as a witness except her 2 daughters and her brother, which they found a little suspicious. Why didn't you bring any of the more prominent men in the area to support your claim that you were always,
So I'm guessing she didn't get.
Yeah,
was
she
it
didn't.
denied?
And it was denied, and actually it does say in there that it was denied because she didn't have sufficient evidence to prove that she was completely loyal. And if you go back, we're going to talk about newspapers in a minute, but her 2 daughters were both married to men who were enlisted in the Army of Northern Virginia and fought under General Lee. So I think it was kind of hard for her to say.
Yeah.
She didn't have a son that fought, but her husband did not fight because I guess he was a little too old, but still, yeah.
Looks pretty suspicious.
It
to
was,
me, for
but
sure.
it was a great 39
Yeah.
pages of really a snippet into my grandmother's lives and my grandfather's life. So that was really, really neat. So definitely look into those Southern claims if your ancestor was in the South, whether they supported the Union or the Confederate Army. So good stuff.
And you have a little tip here to save the images as a JPEG.
Oh yeah,
so it's better imaging.
When I was on Fold 3, it says, "Do you want to download the image?" Of course, I want to download the image. It says, "Do you want to download the folder?" I said, "Great, easy, one step." But it came down as a PDF, obviously, because it's multiple 39 pages. But the images were a little blurry, so I went back and I downloaded each of the 39 pages separately as a JPEG. And they're much clearer, they're sharper, and now I can manipulate them.
Okay, it takes a little bit longer.
It did take a little bit longer.
You have a better, crisper image.
I do have a crisper image. So
take the time to do to get
or do
what you
both.
want.
Yeah, exactly. So that was just a little tip that I noticed. Trying to get those to where you can really see them well.
Okay, so you'd mentioned newspapers before.
You
can get a publication of enlistments and killed in action, home on leave.
Right. I think that those kind of give you an idea of what the community was like during when your ancestor was serving in the war. And, I was just mentioning my 3rd great-grandmother. And I found an article in, this was the Daily Dispatch from Richmond, Virginia. Now, they were living in Shenandoah County. And it says, from Tom's Brook, which was the little tiny town where they were from, that there was, and this is really hard to read because it's really blurry, but it says that there were 11 Crables in the contingent that left, including sons of David Crable, which was which would have been my 2nd great-grandfather, my 3rd great-grandfather. And so it talks about the number of men who left from this area and how they were the most expert marksmen in the county, and kind of playing
a
up
trend
this
there.
whole, exactly.
The best linen, the best marksmen.
So what are you saying? That my ancestors exaggerate?
Saying anything.
I think you're accusing my ancestors of something.
Of course not. I have never room to talk.
You don't know anything about your ancestors.
Oh my gosh, I know nothing. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay.
So, and I found this from through the Library of Congress, their Chronicling America series. So I think everyone's probably familiar with newspapers.com,
Newspaper archives.
genealogy, bank, but don't overlook the National Archives because they've got a lot of good stuff on it. And I actually found this through them as well. So, do it by you can look by state, which I always like to do. Although we did have a friend who found an article on her ancestor from Georgia through a Connecticut newspaper because the Connecticut newspaper had picked up the
local Georgia
newspaper, right?
Which we can't find anymore,
right?
But they picked up the story,
right? And so she was able to find the story through the Connecticut paper who had republished. So, you
never know.
Start small and then grow out.
Yeah, because it could be there somewhere for sure.
But you also find, again, especially during World War I, World War II, if the guys were home on leave, killed in action. If they were awarded a medal
Right.
for something, those were usually made the local papers, and it lists parents' names, lists where their service was. So that's all good information.
Yeah. So again, my family, I haven't found anybody in my family.
In any of the wars? Nobody served?
Well, nobody served in the Civil War that I can find. I do have a DAR. I do have a Patriot.
Right. Yep.
My Patriot donated some beef to they donated some beef, but it counts, right?
Absolutely.
So I haven't found like proof of anyone else yet.
Is your Patriot a man or a woman?
He's a man.
Oh, okay. All right.
Not a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
So
there's definitely some on my husband's side, but
but nobody else.
Yeah. Not that I've really found and documented. Not a direct ancestor.
Right.
I do have some great uncles and whatnot, but
Okay.
not direct.
Not direct, yeah. I actually don't have anybody direct since the Civil War. I mean, I had some uncles who fought in World War II, but my father served in the military, but between wars. And my grandfather, he was born in 1877, so he was just too old for World War One.
One I haven't looked at too much is the War of 1812, but I know all that is getting digitized, and I'm hoping
Full 3 has
somebody will have that on
over
there.
70% now of those pensions, and those records digitized. So they're doing a great job on that.
So,
Yes, so you need to keep looking back. If your ancestor was at that right age to fight in 1812, keep going
checking.
back. Yeah,
somebody might pop up. And when you go back that far, you've got a bigger array of ancestors to look for too. That
True.
Not just 1 or 2. It's like 6 or 10. Quite a lot.
So yeah, if they're born in 1780s, even early 1790s, yeah.
If I find somebody, I'll post about it.
Okay.
It probably won't be a blog post because, as you all know, we're the worst at blog posting.
And there would be you.
I'm sorry.
You know what? I think I have to. I have to write one. I have to write one.
I shouldn't say it's you. It's definitely me. I'm the worst at blog posting, but you're much more. You're not much more. You were better at it than me at getting it together. But actually,
right.
I do better at just little posts on social media.
You're the social media guru. I do nothing.
So I'll be posting it on social media if I find somebody who has
Excellent.
a military record in my family.
All right. So
But that'll be homework. So anyway, enjoy finding your military ancestors.
And keep in mind, it's not just the men, but it's also
That's
the
right.
women. In this case, in that the Southern Claims Commission, it was my third great grandmother.
Yes.
So it was under her name, not her husband's name. So look under both. You never know what you're going to find.
Yep.
All right. Until
Till
next time. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. Please email us with any questions or comments at genealogyhappyhour@gmail.com.
Visit our website, www.genealogyhappyhour.com, for additional resources, books, and wines. Don't forget to drink responsibly
And never drink around genealogical documents.